authenticity over pattern matching. And this is a very interesting concept. If you think about what people tend to do, or what counselors tend to advise you, is to do some kind of pattern matching. This has succeeded, and therefore you should do this like a template. It's a very subpar process because any counseling ecosystem, including the biggest ones in the world, would not have access to absolute data, and they cannot isolate the context of that particular person and say, this is what you would do, and that would succeed. It's almost always driven by who the person is, what his or her context is, and therefore what he or she has done. So I think a good way to think about is be authentic to who you are, be authentic to what your child is, focus on that, do things because it's good fun, do things because it's focused upon building capacity and doing these things progressively to a higher level and based on his or her genuine interest. And if you were to keep that in your mindset, not only will your child grow during these years when he or she is doing those activities, he would have fun, but it's likely to get into a better school rather than when you're obsessing maniacally about these activities. And frankly, I tell this to a lot of my mentees that having a little bit of free time is a good strategy because it allows you to anticipate different possibilities that are emanating. Sometimes things are changing and you may want to do something else. Your interests are evolving. And if you have a non-committed zone in your calendar, you can commit to that based on these exigencies and unanticipated situations. Universities do not seek holistic profiles as a rule, right? If you are an all-rounder, a natural all-rounder, that's great. But universities are looking for angular profiles, very spiky, depth-driven profiles. You have a particular interest, you've spent time in that, and you build that up to a level that is disproportionately high or better than what a typical student at your age and your experience level would have. That's the angular profile that we are talking about. At a class level, when multiple angular profiles come together, it becomes a holistic class. But at an individual level, in my experience, angular profiles, spikier profiles make more sense. Do a few activities, but do them deeply. What matters, and it's intuitive, but international level activities, national level activities are obviously much more important. Having done those activities for a longer period of time is more important. If you're doing them at a progressively higher level, the trajectory is upward looking or being maintained, that's a good sign, right? City level, district level, state level, national, international level, that's certainly very useful. And ideally, if they are aligned around who you are, what your interests are, what your majors are likely to be, that's an additional reinforcement factor to say that, look, I'm able to understand this person, why he is doing finance, and now he's applying into economics major and investment competitions. And so all of this is coming together, right? At some level, at least at the initial stage in grade 8, for example, someone was asking grade 9, maybe part of grade 10, try to look for variety in the sense that you're trying to experiment with different kind of things to say that, look, this is what I would want to spend more time in. So that is, again, a good way to start. And then progressively, as you grow further into your school and into your grade 11, this funnel becomes narrower and you focus on those one or two key activities. Again, how universities evaluate activities, if you want to think about it a little deeply, and you'll realize that there's a lot of embellishment which is happening in our country, right? Anywhere is activity inflation. People are doing all different kinds of activities. Everyone has access to summer schools. Everyone has access to research papers and programs. But if you start to think a little bit more deeply, you would see that most of that is done because you as parents have access to those. It's not necessarily done because the person or the kid has a genuine interest. And oftentimes the quality of work is also not done very well. A grade 11 or grade 12 student is not genuinely expected to do a graduate level research, right? It does not typically get published. A professor would typically not take such a student under his or her patronage and guide him or her towards a meaningful research. So when parents come and ask me about this, I say that, look, you can do this, but most of these projects would probably be self-driven projects rather than one which are guided by university professors. So again, stick to your natural environment and let your child do things which are indicating his interest, his ability and effort rather than your ability and effort. And that, to my mind, would be a very sincere advice that I would give you. Again, because of AI, there's too much of polish which has happened. You would see an adult voice coming out in a child's essay. Try to stay away from that. Again, the idea is that your child fumbles, make mistakes. Keep a journal of it and share that during the time of your application. That's probably a good way to indicate growth rather than something which is impeccably perfect and shining. And think about things which are hard to fake, right? For example, IOQM pathway. I gave you the example of that iteration which was done for MIT Makers portfolio, which was done 35 times. There was video of that, supported by multiple layers of proof, a teacher's recommendation, the journal of how these different iterations were made. So you do things which are hard to fake. One of my students who got into Harvard, his only activity, as a matter of fact, was him being a participant from India in the International Mathematics Olympiad. And that's it. Of the 10 activities which are given in Common App, I don't think he was able to go beyond 3 or 4. So again, genuineness, authenticity, doing things actually because your kid likes them. These are good ways to ensure that the kid is likely to get into a good university. The kid is getting prepared for getting into business of life and likely to get into a good setup. Of course, the evidence should be multi-source.